Thank you for joining on a Saturday morning. I know it's difficult for most people. For Raj, it is evening. This is a session, workshop 6 under the second India IGF, which is themed as Secure Technologies for Empowering Bharat and Safe Internet. So to give a brief background of why this session, it's because if we look at it, Indian government has been introducing various schemes under the Digital India campaign and trying to connect most of the people and the government services online. There is also a lot of work being done in improving the internet infrastructure to empower the citizens of the country. While the aim is, and while doing so, the aim is also to ensure that there is safe, secure, and trusted online services, and the citizens can use these services confidently. Especially now after the pandemic, when even a vegetable seller is selling and even receiving money online, and the small businesses are going online or expanding their markets online. And most of the citizen centric services are also going online. Women, girls are also seeking knowledge and also opportunities to empower their lives. It is very vital that our communications, interactions remain safe and secure. And we've seen that technologies such as encryption and other security technologies help to provide that, build that trust and confidence amongst users. So, in this discussion, where we have Rajnesh Singh from Internet Society, Sarayu from Aapti, and Amol Kulkarni, they have all these esteemed panelists have been working a lot in this field. They have done researches, studies, and also been involved in these discourses. So, they would be deliberating on how the regulation should be framed, so that secure technologies can be promoted or facilitated, so that the dream of having a complete digital India, where each and every government initiatives can be used by even the bottom of the pyramid, can be actually seen in reality. And also perhaps deliberate on how these technologies, how to use these technologies, and how these secure technologies are actually helping to uplift people, and what more should be done. So without much ado, I would ask the panelists, since we just have 50 minutes and we want to take some questions also, and each of the panelists, at least in 5 minutes, that what your perspective is on how regulation should be framed, so that secure technologies can facilitate a digital Bharat, and where other government initiatives also can be accessed securely. And I know, you have been doing some research, Sarayu, and even you, Amol, from CUTS, and ISOC and GEC has been doing a lot of work on this. So from your perspectives, what do you think? How should it be done? So ladies first, Sarayu first, then we'll go to Raj and then Amol.
Thank you for that, Amrita. And thanks for hosting this discussion. I think it's a very critical part of the conversation. As India enters its G20 presidency year, having a conversation about a safe, secure, empowered internet is, I think, very, very critical. And I think secure technologies are a fundamental building block of that. I think that, there are very many ways to parse the question of thinking about regulations, but perhaps first I could very briefly talk about our own work in this space. We've leaned a lot on both the work of ISOC as well as CUTS in doing our work, but our work explored the social and economic benefits of encryption. So we both looked at it qualitatively through the perspectives of various stakeholders to understand how they understood encryption and secure technologies more broadly speaking. And then we also tried to model a little bit the economic benefits of encryption and of itself. We looked specifically at E2E, but of course, secure technologies is a broader conception that one must keep in mind. The evidence is quite overwhelming in the sense that, it establishes both qualitatively as well as through the model that encryption has vast economic benefits. It enhances both broader economic participation and economic growth, but also enhances factors like trust in the digital economy, which is critical if you want to have an agenda that's built on digital. So the notion of a digital Bharat requires, in that sense, fundamental core, which is secure technologies. Now, getting to the perspective of regulation, I think thinking about the notion of sovereignty, which is something that's been talked about quite a lot, is helpful. Though the question is, how do you interpret sovereignty in terms of thinking about secure technologies? Sovereignty, at least in the digital sense, and there's quite a bit of debate in the academic world, I would say, on actually what does sovereignty mean. Is it just control of digital infrastructures and control of digital systems with hypervisibility, or is it something else? And of course, while that academic debate sort of carries on, I think pulling out a few strands is useful. First, in terms of thinking about sovereignty as fundamentally protecting citizens, protecting and enabling innovation in the digital economy, which is also a state goal, sort of fulfilling the policy aim, and also ensuring security of the nation state. So the territorial sense of the nation state is also useful. And so regulations need to account for all of these factors, regardless of what domain they're doing it in, particularly in the digital economy. So I think that thinking about these three notions and how secure technologies can actually enable these three notions is useful. And what I'll try to do over the course of the next couple of minutes is try and explore that. In terms of protecting citizens, both our research and I think quite a lot of the research within the crew here has established that it enhances digital trust. It also ensures secure communication. So the fundamental rights guaranteed by our constitution to have free and fair conversations are also something that secure technologies can very significantly protect. It also enables innovation because the link to digital trust and participation in the digital economy is fairly well established. So contrary to the idea that innovation will be hindered in the absence of secure technologies, the evidence actually shows that it enables it. And in terms of protecting the state as well, and sort of the notion of national security, secure technologies can also play a role there. And that has to do with the fact that any measures that undermine security or secure technologies can actually end up creating single points of failure and entry points for anybody. I mean, the technology will not distinguish between who is trying to break in and who's not. And so the notion of security as something which is about only one particular type of actor having visibility is really not true. It could be bad actors, bad state, bad non-state actors, which means that secure technologies in that sense are a fundamental building block. They're an invisible glue in a sense that holds the building blocks of the digital economy together. And I'll pause on that thought and perhaps circle back to discussing a little bit more detail around regulations. But back to you, Amrita.
Thank you. Raj, I'll go to you. Most of the times the discussions are national interest, national security versus, that's the debate which comes in. But however, sometimes we actually forget that secure technologies have, as in if you look at the studies done by Sarayu's team and even Amol's, present that it has an economic benefit also. It empowers people. So how do you look at it, as in when you're looking at it from the global perspective and also when you zoom down into India?
Okay, so I'll take a slightly higher level view and response, because Sarayu and Amol's organizations have done some very extensive work in analysis on this. So, to people listening into this session today, if you haven't seen the output of their work, please do. I do highly recommend that you read what they've done, as well as what my own organization has done in this space in collaboration with other people in India in particular. But let me, and as I said, I want to take a slightly higher level view of this. Let me start off by saying that, we often say things that apply in the offline world apply online as well. And so very often, I think we keep on ignoring that, or maybe sometimes forgetting about that very one clear fact. Now, security is no different. Just as we prioritize personal security and security for things in the offline world, for example, jewelry, watches, and other valuables, I think we need to do very much the same for prioritizing security in the online world. And there always seems to be this gap that exists, and oh, it's different online. It's not. In fact, it's even more important these days. Now, as others have said, that as we further embrace the digital world, so much of our daily interactions have moved online. And again, people, when we start talking about what's secure and what's not secure and what technologies we can deploy and what we can't deploy, sometimes we, there seems to be this tend to ignore things like, from banking to booking flights to sending messages to each other, be it to family or professionally, shopping, and even availing government services. All of those need security to be in place. If you don't, as I think Sarayu mentioned about trust in the online world, the trust deteriorates very, very quickly. Now, each of these actions that we do, or each of these interactions that we have online, have an inherent risk if the connections are not secure. Now, it goes without saying that the only thing that guarantees that our online interactions remain safe and secure are encryption technologies. There's no debate, no argument about that. And very specifically, it's end-to-end encryption that makes things as trustworthy as possible. That ensures that the information that we are sharing and the information that we're receiving, whatever that information may be, remains secure. At the same time, not a single day goes by. In fact, sometimes multiple times in a day, we hear reports of some sort of cybersecurity issue. So there really is this, urgency to make things more secure, not less secure. We need to ensure that we don't compromise on this, because the moment we do, then trust of the internet starts to deteriorate, and that has a domino effect on so many other things. On the one hand, we want to move everything online onto the digital world, but if we don't secure what we're doing, then we're creating a problem in itself. So going to your initial question, Amrita, I think as such, regulations and policies really need to have security by design as a primary motivator. The Internet Society has made available the Internet Impact Assessment Toolkit that can be used to determine how regulations, policies, or indeed technology choices may affect the Internet and the way in which it works. The toolkit can be used by anyone, from policymakers to startups thinking about a new service or application, or to even individuals to see what impact policy or technology actions may have on the Internet and the way it works. And again, I bring us back to that fact that technology is there to help make our lives easier. And therefore, when we are talking about policies and regulations, those policies and regulations should be facilitative in nature, right? They should help the internet and internet-based technologies to continue delivering, the social and economic benefits that sometimes I think we're starting to take for granted as well now. And ultimately, all this new technologies and all the great things technology brings is there to empower people. And I think that's how we need to frame regulations and policies. Ask that very clear, concise question: what is it we're trying to achieve? Are we trying to allow things to innovate and develop and evolve, or are we trying to force them in a manner that, why do you need to do this? That question sometimes seems to be asked by by regulations and policies that are being put forward. They seem to be put forward as a barrier rather than as an enabling environment, and I was going to say that annoys me. It does annoy me, but it concerns me greatly as well. That policies and regulations fundamentally should be facilitative in nature, not as a barrier to things. So I'll pause there, Amrita, and let's hear what Amol has to say on this.
Thanks, Raj. As in, 2 or 3 things which actually you mentioned is security should be by design, and policies should be facilitative by nature and not hindering what we want to achieve. With that, let me go to Amol.
Thank you, Amrita. It is a pleasure to be here and work and speak alongside experts like Sarayu and Raj. Obviously, we have gone through their work. And at Cuts, we do a lot of... Am I not audible clearly? Okay. At Cuts, we do a lot of work with consumers, for consumers, and therefore in the space of secure technologies as well. We have done some consumer-facing work, including some surveys with consumers to understand their awareness and expectation with secured technologies. Now, I'll just paste the link of some of our findings here. But basically, what we see is that there is a genuine expectation amongst consumers that the messages or the information that they are sharing are read and received only by the recipient. And in case there is a suspicion that the technologies are less secure, the extent of communication or the people with whom they are communicating, that is likely to reduce. So there is a genuine possibility of harm to consumers if we are weakening secure technologies or weakening end-to-end encryption. And I just want to sort of pause and state here that the objective of this session is safe and trusted technologies for Bharat. And most of the consumers and citizens in Bharat are at the fringes. They Any one bad behavior or one bad incident can take them back to non-digital world, which can result in lack of access or inadequate access to services which are meant to empower them. So I think the harm which Bharat can have as a result of lack of secure technology is much more when compared to somebody who is in urban area or who is connected with multiple devices. Because as you had also pointed out during your initial remarks, that there are a lot of government to citizen benefits and digital India campaign and awareness generation empowering sort of initiatives. All of that relies on the fact that rural consumers in rural, semi-urban, and vulnerable sections are able to benefit from such technologies, and therefore security and trust is predominant for such consumers to benefit. But in addition to that, so we have also been working with communities who are, say, whistleblowers in nature, or abuse, or victims of domestic abuse, or journalists, or press, or watchdogs of how these sort of services are delivered on ground, and what are the concerns and challenges which consumers face. And secure technologies are the basis from which on which they communicate their findings, and they disseminate their findings, and they hold the people in power to account. So this is very important, that civil society, watchdogs, people who want safe spaces for communication and interaction are made available such spaces, so that they can do their good work, and they can continue to highlight the problems which vulnerable sections of the country face. Uh, However, there's also, in terms of regulation, I think there is some genuine concerns with respect to use of such technologies to spread problematic content and sort of hate speech, and which can result in online and offline harm for such vulnerable communities. Now, these concerns are genuine, but the answer to these concerns are not necessarily weakening the secure technologies and having sort of ways to enter into and read through, because as Sarayu said, technology does not differentiate between good and bad actors, and anybody, if there is a sort of space which is created for people to look into or eavesdrop, then any bad actor can do that, and the whole point of making the technology secure will fall away. And therefore, there is a need for a, a comprehensive regulatory impact assessment or cost benefit analysis before proposing any regulation which can impact the security of such technologies. There is a need for clear study to understand what could be the possible unintended consequences of such technologies, particularly on Bharat and rural communities, because they stand to lose much more as against some of the benefits which might accrue in terms of reducing misinformation, hate speech, and also alternate ways to address similar concerns need to be sort of designed for an optimal regulation. I'll just stop here maybe, and I'll come back in the second round. Thank you.
Thanks, Amol. So, if I can, you said many things, but what resonates is that consumers want secured communication. If the communication is not secured, they are not likely to use those platforms or tools to that extent and look at, they may look at offline alternatives, which is not something which we want. The other thing is what you mentioned is before any regulation is being drafted, there needs to be a comprehensive study on whether, how it would be benefiting, the cost benefit analysis of actually bringing in that kind of regulation. And perhaps there are genuine issues which law enforcement and others are raising, but is making the technology less secure going to be the solution, or are there other alternate solutions which can be explored? That needs to be, I think, discussed more, that there may be alternatives to it also. I think that's the message which you are trying to give. So I had another question, but in case after your initial thoughts, any of you want to kind of react to any of the others. But, we find, as you have mentioned, that secured communications are a conduit for fake news, spreading information or images, etc., which is not required for children, the CSAM things and all that. So those are certain things, or, it harms law enforcement, etc. But does the good outweigh the bad is also something which we need to discuss. So you've been doing your studies and all that. And from that perspective, I would like to hear from you, as in how can secure technologies actually help to empower people from the remotest part of India, the bottom of the pyramid, so that, they can uplift their economic and social status, because as you mentioned, Amol, they are new people to the internet, and if it is not secured for them, it is expensive for them, they would not be using it. So how do you look at this? Sarayu first, and then I'll go to Raj and then Amol.
Perhaps Amol is best suited to do this first, given the extent and depth of his work. And I will just handle it.
Fair enough. Amol, you go first.
Because I wanted to tackle a slightly different dimension. Back to you, Amol.
Fair enough.
Yes, thank you, Amrita. Thanks, Sarayu. So I think definitely there are various innovations which are happening to make technology secure and empower vulnerable communities, including women and other groups, to ensure that they can use such technologies confidently and with trust. And these innovations are happening not only in India but in other countries as well. So we see things like fingerprint lock or iris scan and such other mechanisms through which access to bank accounts is only limited to the person who owns whose sort of fingerprints or lock iris are stored. So there could be security concerns around this also, which could be tackled, but this could be one of the ways to think about this. Then we have also seen innovations in other countries to sort of highlight alert finger mode. So, for instance, if there is a fraud and you have punched, you have saved your 5 fingers, but your thumb print is something which is alert finger, and in case there is malicious entity who is wanting to withdraw the money, if you put in the thumb, then the alert goes to law enforcement agencies. And this is real use cases of innovative technologies to sort of empower people. We have also seen use of secure technologies with community organizations. So, for instance, community radios, and there are child protection call centers, which use secured technologies and which are functional 24/7 to sort of record messages and to call back, to alert security agencies and law enforcement agencies, and to prevent some of the offline harm that we are sort of witnessing in rural parts of the country. At Cuts, we actually have grievance redress centers, and we run child protection helpline known as Childline. Both of them are sort of available 24/7, 365 days a year, and you can send messages through WhatsApp. You can send messages through encrypted and other secure technologies for us to receive them securely and also alert law enforcement agencies. So there are real use cases to benefit vulnerable sections through secure technologies, and these need to be sort of scaled up further, is what I'll want to say here.
Thank you, Amol. I think what you raised is there are alternatives to support communities. What needs to be done is more capacity building within these communities and supporting these communities with the necessary grievance addressal, or the support as to what to do when something happens. I think those are more important. I go to Raj. Raj, if you want to bring some different dimensions also, please feel free.
Okay, so I mean, I will not compete with Amol's expertise and background on this. So, and I think he very, very well captured, some of the things that are out there that can help people. So again, I'll go with a slightly higher level perspective on this again, and it's also because it's not just about India, right? It's also other parts in the region, other countries in the region, and other parts of the world as well. The similarities are there, the commonalities exist in what the issues that we're all trying to face, right? And I will go back to my favorite term of the day again today, security by design, right? Now, it's easy to say that we need to educate people on digital security, and we'll run an awareness session on this and that, and misinformation and fake news, or whatever else you want to call it, right? Or abuse online, and et cetera, et cetera. I absolutely agree with that. Of course, we need to do that, as education does remain key to increasing awareness. Ultimately, there's no, that's the way to do it. But in practice, it's not so easy, is it? Right? Now, take India as an example. It's a diverse country. People, culture, languages. You cross borders, and people are very different in culturally, and be it a language or even the script they use, right? And it also comes through to how people engage socially as well, right? There are differences. That's what diversity is all about. Now, when we start talking about people from remote areas or those at the bottom of the pyramid, they're the ones who gain most from technology and being online, or can gain the most. Yet, they're also probably the ones who are the most vulnerable. Yeah, and and that vulnerability is problematic because for those who are newly online, the online world can look very attractive, and it's a place of wonder, right? I think, I would even say that all of us, when we first started exploring the online world, there's an interesting array of things out there. Not all of it is good, not all of it is bad either. There's a mix of things, as there is in real life, right? But online also has its threats, and those newly online or without the necessary digital skills or security skills can very, very quickly become disenfranchised, right? And particularly take the context of some, remote rural village in the middle of the country somewhere, where, things like, be it fake news or distribution of images or whatever, can very quickly cause issues and problems in the local community, right? And that's what that disenfranchisement that I talk about. So trust on the internet is important, as we've said, but as well, it's trust off the internet is so very important, right? They sound similar, but they're two very different things, and I think we need to ensure that both remain in play. And, again, I mentioned security by design, which is, as I said, my favorite term for the day. And, the second favorite would be end-to-end encryption, because those are the basic steps that will ensure that, we have online security for all. I don't see that there's compromise or there's room for compromise on that. Once we have those basic security things in place, then we can build on that foundation with digital literacy skills and user awareness and so on. As I often say, if the basic foundations of the internet and internet-based technologies are not secure, how can we secure anything higher up? And the example I always like to give is, it's when you build a house, you don't build the roof or walls first, right? You start by building the foundation. And that's, I think, what we need here as well, right? If the foundation is not secure, that house will fall apart. And very similarly, if we don't have a secure security foundation for the digital world, very quickly things will start to crumble. So let me pause there and hope it's a bit of food for thought from a slightly higher level perspective.
No, thank you, Raj. I completely agree. And when you were speaking before you came to the house and foundation, even I was thinking that way, that the foundation needs to be there for anything else to stand, So Sarayu, over to you.
Thank you very much. I think it's hard to follow those two sets of comments, but just on the points that both Raj and Amol made about vulnerability, there's also a lot of evidence that to show that there are sort of intersectionalities even within vulnerability, which means that women, for example, are much more harmed by the consequences of any kind of harm that occurs, whether online or offline. As also the notion that women, for example, have more fragile trust in digital systems, which means that they're much more likely to very quickly sort of go back offline. And notions such as fear, a lack of confidence, all creep into sort of engagement with the digital world. I mean, I shouldn't say too much more about it. Amol's really the expert, but there's a fair amount of empirical evidence from different domains that says that, for example, women will be very much harmed. So particularly from the notion that Digital India is also about empowering women, and I think the government's been making statements to the effect that gender is an important and an inclusive digital economy is a part of India's digital dreams. It's critical to think about who gets harmed and who gets harmed more, even within sort of the notion of vulnerability. I want to sort of switch gears a little bit and talk about, how, if not, because then national security is a concern. The concerns of law enforcement agencies are valid concerns. So how do you sort of think about measures of resilience outside regulatory measures that undermine encryption? And I think that is also a critical conversation to have, just as much as we are talking about the value and the importance of encryption. I know Amol and Raj both highlighted a few, but there are a few categories of thinking of this. One is what can be done with law enforcement. And there's evidence, for example, that offline-online networks, particularly for law enforcement agencies, are a critical capacity to have and a critical capacity to distribute. So how might those be done is one question to answer. Equally, metadata analysis capacities, which very often law enforcement agencies, particularly at the grassroots, might struggle with. So having and making that capacity available in a systematic way are both measures that can build institutional resilience. Amol alluded to a few measures that can be done at the ground level, but we also think, offline grievance redressal mechanisms in a structured and systematic way, not reliant on the ad hoc initiatives of some organizations. Having those mechanisms is very critical. We also think more conscious engagement with civil society institutions, which have, already deep roots in communities, already work with vulnerable populations, have trust. That engagement process needs to be built out. Of course, one must be cautious in not assuming that it's civil society's job to fix a problem that's created from another source. And civil society's, aims, aspirations, ambitions are to protect the community. But nonetheless, civil society can be a very effective and important partner, particularly in redressing challenges that occur around online systems. The last, of course, is product features. I think that we don't talk enough about what kinds of measures within products themselves can be imagined to mitigate harms. So some are friction-oriented product features. You make it difficult to cause some of the harms. You also empower user agency. That's another kind of product feature. So the user is empowered to make those choices within, for example, communication systems. It's very easy to block somebody on WhatsApp, for example, and that's just one type of thing. There's no silver bullet around product features that one can imagine, but it's critical to keep thinking about product innovation and elements in the features themselves that can mitigate some of the harms that arise. And we think user agency is quite quite central. Individual user agency around some of these things is quite critical. I'm going to end with a quote, because we often think of the solution to some of the challenges that arise in society as merely technological. But Kentaro Toyama said, "We fetishize technocratic devices and forget that it's our finger on the on switch and our hands at the control." So I think regulation must continue to grapple with this question of human intent and think of resilience around that question. Back to you, Amrita.
Thank you so much, Sarayu, as in those were very relevant points which you shared. I will try to capture them, and because I have to send the messages to the reports team of the India IGF, they want to highlight it in the closing and also come up with a report. But before I ask you anything, I wanted to ask if anyone has a question in the audience. You can put up your hand or put it into the chat and we'll try to take it. Is there anyone who wants to ask a question? I know it's slightly difficult because you will have to, I don't know if you can put up your hand, but you can put it into the chat or just mention. Okay, while people think about it, we have another 15 minutes. Any questions? I give you another 1 minute to come up with a question. Okay. Okay, there is a question from Shantanu, and it says, just a moment. How does one mitigate the risk of secure technologies getting leaked? It's from Shantanu Sharma. Anyone wants to take it? The panelists, how does one mitigate the risk of secure technologies getting leaked?
So I don't quite get the question. Is perhaps the reference to data breaches rather than because the
yeah, let me just try to see if we can get him to speak. Can the admin upgrade him so that he can ask the question, please? Can you upgrade Shantanu Sharma so that he can explicitly share what his question is? Or Shantanu, can you put it on chat? Are you talking about data breaches or some, access which someone gets in, but inadvertently?
So while it does that, let me just offer some thoughts. Sorry, do you want to go? Go.
No, I just had a very quick response to what I think might be one of the aims of the question, which is how does one ensure the security of secure technologies themselves? I think there have been instances of secure technologies being breached, leakages occurring from seemingly secure systems. One dimension to that we must constantly have on the table is, governance of data access in the first place. I think that we don't talk enough about measures, for example, at the firm level, which navigate what kinds of threats and what kinds of challenges might arise to secure systems. And I think, Kentaro Toyama's invocation, as well as just, the notion that the technology is merely a device in the hands of entities that use and govern them. So thinking about governance frameworks at the firm level, as well as regulatory frameworks that govern sort of broader questions around the use and deployment of secure technologies is quite critical. So I'll pause there and hopefully Shantanu can now ask his question directly, but back to you, Amrita.
Thank you. I think there is some issues in upgrading him, but Raj, please go ahead. You wanted to say something.
Yeah. So, sorry, you covered a little bit of what I was going to say. But, as she was speaking, I had another thought, and because my mind was on a cricket match, which is about to start. So let me give you a cricketing sort of analogy here. Security and cybersecurity and security technologies is, it's like a cricket match that never ends, right? So you've got your fast bowlers who come in and break the stumps apart. And then you've got a solid batsman who keeps hitting 6 after 6, which is fending off these attacks. But that doesn't mean you won't get a bowler who comes in with a googly and takes your wicket next ball, right? So And so what I'm trying to say is that, it's a never-ending game. It's a never-ending tussle between, those who protect and those who want to infiltrate, right? Also realize that there's also the enemy within, right? Now, sometimes you can put up the greatest firewalls and other secure technologies to protect from the outside world. But if you have someone internal to your network, to your organization, who is hell-bent on doing some sort of mischief, be it intentional or non-intentional, that's also a dimension that comes into play. Sometimes it's unintentional that a breach happens. So you need to protect against that too. So it's a game and it's a match, as I said, that never ends, right? So you need to keep on looking at what are your internal governance structures, what are your security protocols. And as new threats emerge, you need to keep updating that. You can't just put something in and say, okay, we're all set and there'll be no problems forever and ever more. That does not happen, right? So that's why it's the match that never ends, right?
Right, thanks. So we have typically 9 minutes, so I would ask you to share your last thoughts in terms of crisp recommendations. And there is also a question from Kapil Goel, just in case you would be able to respond together, is would you suggest comprehensive security framework or guidelines to address security concerns, especially for rural communities? Over to you. And Raj, football matches are now on and you're talking about cricket.
What
So
can
Amol, I start with you.
What can I say?
Amol, I start with you, then Raj and Sarayu, and then we end.
Sure, thanks, Amrita. And I just had a small comment on the previous question as well. So, as Raj had mentioned, that once if you're secure doesn't mean that you're secured every time. You need to constantly upgrade your features, and we have seen things like fat finger errors and other errors wherein humans are at fault more than the technology itself, and therefore continuous upgradation, capacity building, evidence generation, audits are required to ensure that institutions are humans who are managing the institutions are aware of the risks and carry out their functions appropriately. Also, the last thoughts that you had asked for. So I think earlier Raj was talking about security by design. Which can also be sort of incorporated in the regulation. And we have seen different formats of privacy by design, security by design, hard coded into the law so that the industry and the service providers can incorporate them. And I think Sarayu also talked about some of the mechanisms or models through which it can be incorporated. But I think all these, there is a compact which is required amongst the government, industry, and the civil society, consumers, and other stakeholders to ensure that the ecosystem remains secure. It's not regulation comes first and the industry follows, and then the consumers and civil society work. Everybody needs to sort of work together in real time because we do not have a lot of time, and we cannot wait for foundations to be built for the walls to be built after that. I think all efforts need to go together. And lastly, I think regulators are also using technology to identify malicious bad actors and keeping communication secure. I recently read that the telecom regulator.
You would have to reduce it. We just have 3 minutes for each of you.
No, I just sort of there are RegTech and SupTech initiatives. I think TRI is using DLT technology to identify spam callers and also weed them out of the system. I think something similar is required for regulators to up their game and keep the internet ecosystem secure. Thank you.
Thanks, Amol. Raj, there is a question for you, but if you can, most of the security audits are in a point of time. Shouldn't we move towards an era of continuous compliance? With your parting thoughts, any thoughts on this?
So very quickly, in response to Anupam's question, security audits at a point in time are so very 1990s, aren't they? So I think, we have to change that mindset as well, right? And I agree, with the technology-based compliance mechanisms now available, I think, there needs to be, we need to gravitate towards that a bit more and not, we did the audit last year, sub TK, that doesn't work anymore, right? So that's one. Just to some closing comments, one, I think Amol maybe mentioned unintended consequences when he was speaking earlier. And I just want to highlight the fact there that, that is so very true. Not every regulation or policy is intended to do bad things, right? The problem is it hasn't been considered with the 360 approach, where that, what are the unintended consequences? So that's why I pointed to our Internet Impact Assessment Toolkit as an example. So that's one. The other is, the need to have this multi-stakeholder approach. We can't leave this to one entity, group, person, organization. It can't be just government. It can't be just law enforcement. It can't be civil society. It can't be the tech companies, right? Because this whole digital world is so much bigger than that now. It permeates everything that we do, right? So that coming together and having a common understanding of what needs to be achieved, and what the common goal is so very important. And no one can do it alone, and that's why I think these conversations need to continue. But it's not just about having conversations; it's also about implementing actions that support those conversations. So I'll stop there, and thanks very much to my panelists. This was quite fun.
Thank you, Raj. Sarayu, over to you for the last comments.
Thank you. I just have 2 minutes, and I'll definitely keep it 2 points, and I'll definitely keep it to 3 minutes. But I think the first thought is that, in all of this discussion, particularly around the frameworking from the regulatory perspective, we need to think about costs in a more complicated way. It's not necessarily just the financial costs, but there's a whole lot around compliance. There's also risks, because with very many traceability regulations, what you're also creating is honeypots of data, which bring with it inherent risks and making a whole amount of information that is vulnerable. And also we must take into account that the costs most often and the consequences are borne by the most vulnerable. So increased friction, erosion of trust are all consequences that are borne very often by women, rural communities, the ones with the least access to mitigation mechanisms. So thinking about costs in a broader sense than just tangible, visible financial costs is something we must do about every regulation, but most certainly about regulations around secure technologies. I think the other one is, and I think Amol and Raj both brought it up, is that we don't think about offline enough. There's this sort of cyber exceptionalism that we have, that the digital world is somehow unique and all of it can be governed digitally. But whether it is encrypted technologies, data protection more broadly, privacy, etc., the offline is coming across as something that's very, very significant and critical. So thinking about resilience of institutions alongside is very important. So whether it's law enforcement agencies and their capacities, community and community organizations and the roles they play, as well as product features, alongside thinking about regulations around secure technologies is also critical. I'll pause. There's a whole lot. I feel like this discussion can go on for very much longer, but back to you, Amrita.
Thank you so much. I think as a panel, we've been good. We have 3 minutes to hand over to the hosts, but thank you so much. I actually enjoyed our conversation today, as in it was nice to talk with friends here. We can talk more, but I think what is important is, as Raj mentioned, something like security by design needs to be incorporated. We need to look at the bigger picture as to, many times the regulation is intended for something, but there may be certain harms which it may cause. So those, analysis needs to be done, the unintentional consequences. Obviously, as Sarayu mentioned, we need to look at the broader way. The costs need to be looked at a broader way. We need to find the linkages between the offline and the online, because they are not different. And lastly, but most importantly, these conversations, discussions, or regulations need to be formed in a multi-stakeholder way, a truly multi-stakeholder way, because it's not the business of just one. There are socio-economic, political aspects involved when, we are talking about it. They don't work in silos. So with this, I thank you all for, giving us this time, sharing your thoughts on a Saturday morning, evening. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. And I hope Raj can go enjoy his cricket match now.
And then football later.
Football in the evening. See you. Bye-bye.